Good afternoon. Welcome to Bear Grads, How I Finished My Dissertation, presented by Dr. Dannon Cox, Assistant Professor of Community Health Education at the Colorado School of Public Health at the University of Northern Colorado. My name is Nancy Henke. I am UNC's textbook affordability librarian, and I will be moderating today's session. And with that, I'd like to introduce today's speaker. Dannon Cox is an assistant professor with the Colorado School of Public Health at UNC. Dannon's research focuses on the use of digital media to enhance public health goals and promote community health. With 20 years of experience in media production and a passion for physical activity, Dannon brings a unique insight of pedagogy in public health practice and research. Dannon does not like writing these types of bios because he has to awkwardly stand there while someone talks about him. But that's academia for you. Dannon practices yoga daily and loves to stay hydrated. With that, I hand it over to our presenter, Dannon Cox.
Thank you, Nancy. I'm honored that you actually honored that part of the speech. So hello, everyone, and thank you for joining this. Again, my name is Dannon Cox, and I'm just going to go over how I finished my dissertation, and this is going to be a very broad and somewhat fast-paced kind of story about it. Hopefully to provide some tips and also some ideas maybe that relate to your PhD journey or graduate school journey. So I'm going to go ahead and share screen. Can I just get a thumbs up to make sure that y'all can see this? Okay, awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you, Nancy. Okay. Let's go ahead and get started. So as Nancy said, at any point, if you have any questions, I can't see everyone, but feel free to just interrupt or to put it in the chat, and Nancy can also interrupt me. I'm more than happy to discuss throughout, or we can wait till the end. Even if it's past 75 minutes, I'm more than happy to still have chats with y'all because I feel like these are important for you. So some of the objectives of this presentation, I'm going to discuss the processes that I experienced when completing a dissertation. I'm going to provide some tips and advice for the dissertation process, and I'm going to provide some very quick examples of my dissertation presentation. When I say that it's very quick, I'm going to go through it super fast, and also just know that you're going to have your own presentation and how that looks. I'm just going to offer little bits of advice when it comes to actually presenting. And then we're going to end with any further discussions that we might have regarding your academic journey. So, what is a dissertation? A dissertation is the ability to conduct research. A common saying that you might hear either from your advisor, from other folks, is a good dissertation is a done dissertation, meaning that you might have a lot of motivation to do as much as you can, but also at the end of the day, they're just making sure that can you conduct research? And that's for the PhD. There are other terminal degrees out there, but this is primarily focused around the PhD area. A dissertation is extremely detailed and organized. It goes down to the very granular pieces of your study to make sure that can someone repeat your study. A lot of dissertations end up becoming manuscripts, and a lot of that detailed information might be removed just for word purposes. So just know that the point, though, is to really hone into your own study and be as detailed as possible. It also, in my opinion, and what should be the case, is that this should be a personal interest. You chose graduate school for a reason, and you chose your program for a reason, because you have a personal interest. The other part of that is, how does your personal interest hit a gap in common knowledge on a said topic? So the example that I'll give on my end is how I come from a background in digital media. With my passion in digital media, I wanted to really focus that around college and universities and their physical activity courses. So that's why I have these fun little icons just to represent some of my dissertation and focus. So the dissertation is that larger research, but it might be one research or it might be a culmination of multiple. A standard dissertation is what is usually done throughout like the historical approach to dissertations. What does a dissertation involve? Well, just like any peer-reviewed article, or most articles, there's going to be an introduction, a literature review, a methods, a results, and a discussion. These are usually divided by chapters. So when people are saying, I'm just now finishing chapter 2 of something, it means that they're finishing up their literature review in terms of a standard dissertation. But it's not just these pieces, there's usually references as well. Not just that, there's also an appendix that comes along with this dissertation. So when it comes to when people are like, I wrote 250 pages, a lot of that might be from the appendix and references. So although I wrote those pages, so mine was 193 pages, if I broke it down, the majority of that really came from we have the appendix, which was 39 pages, and the literature review, which was 40 pages. So just to put it into perspective, that's where a lot of the content of this 193-page dissertation came from. Mine was qualitative, and I'll give further examples of what that looks like. If you're running a quantitative, it might be a lot shorter than that. I've seen dissertations be less than 100 pages, although that's hard to do, especially with your literature review, because you love your content so much. There's also other types of dissertations that you can complete. So again, mine was the standard traditional style. Talk to the grad school and talk to your advisor if you want to go for maybe a publish-ready dissertation. And what this looks like is rather than going for this 193 pages of a document, you might have just actually written for a publisher, or excuse me, a manuscript journal itself, and you are ready just to, once you finish your research, you're ready to just publish it. And this is becoming more common because a lot of folks want to have publications, and it actually saves time. So for instance, my 193 pages, I had to trim it down in order to get it published into a manuscript in a journal. A dissertation is not a sprint. It's not a marathon. In my opinion, I would put it as a triathlon. It comes in different waves or different events that is one long stream race. And this is going to be kind of the theme that I'm going to focus on throughout this presentation, just to give a little bit more of a visual clarity into the different steps and components to it. This is a Gantt chart, and this is something that I started to create while I was a PhD student, and this was to help map out when do I begin stuff and when should I be worrying about things. You might not have a Gantt chart, but maybe have a schedule and have a deadline for when you want to finish things, and work with your advisor on this. So if I was to kind of divide this into our triathlon piece, we're going to start off in a regular triathlon. You usually start off in the swimming piece. So we're going to first break it down and talk about the very first part, which is basically your comps. Within this, you have your plan of study, also known as the POS. And this is basically what courses are you taking in order for you to graduate? Are there any other prereqs that you actually have to get done? Within this time, at the very beginning, you also need to have a committee. You need to talk to your advisor and find academic or professors who are here at UNC who also have a general understanding of your topic so they can provide support throughout your process. You might have a committee change, and I'll briefly share about that here in a little bit. But then there's the written and the oral comps. Now, when I say that I did the traditional style, there's also different ways of doing comps. Some have different ways of doing, say, a written comps. For instance, in my case, I had two options. The first option was I could sit in a room with a computer that had no internet, and they would ask me questions, and I would have to memorize everything and hopefully spit out really good essays. I know that other programs actually do that as a non-option. However, I had that second option, which was a take-home. And for the take-home, I had 7 days to answer 4 questions, and it was all open book, open-ended. I just had to do it within that 7 days. Versus the other way, I basically had about 4 to 7 hours. I forget what it was. I didn't choose it, so I don't remember. And then there are the oral comps, and I'll go a little bit further into that here in a second. Before you do anything, even before you get your committee, as you're taking classes and you're really finding your passion and your topic, start to stay organized within your within the peer-reviewed journals that you start to look up in all the research that you're doing. The 3 options that that I am showing here is Zotero, Mendeley, and some sort of your own way. Zotero and Mendeley are third-party software platforms that can actually be installed on your computer, but also on your browser. So as you're, like, say, browsing on, say, Firefox or Chrome, you can actually click a button up in the top in the URL area, and you can actually save your documents. And what's nice about Zotero and Mendeley is that it will automatically save things in APA format. If you want it in a different style, you can do that as well. It'll have notes, it'll have the authors, it has everything that you really want. It will also save highlighting spaces. So if you want to actually have it on, say, an iPad on a separate document, you can actually download Zotero and look at the same document where you highlighted things. So start with one and stick with it. Don't go from Zotero and then halfway through go to Mendeley. It's going to throw you off. Keep everything as organized as possible. What I mean by custom is, called me old-fashioned, but I love to download articles, sometimes printing them, and then I would actually have a binder, or I would have just a folder on my desktop, and just to keep everything organized, make sure that the titles are good, the authors, so on and so forth. So for instance, in that case, I would have something like the author, the year. The keywords are very important when you're trying to remember. If I had an open book exam, I'm scrounging for certain references. I need to know which one was talking about physical activity courses. Oh, that's right. It was Smith & Jones, 2017. Well, what was in Smith & Jones 2017? Well, it had the methods in there. It has the results. So make sure that you have some way to remember what peer-reviewed articles did what. This helps with your comprehensive exams. What are your comps or your comprehensive exams? This is first off, you need to have a committee, and this committee will usually have your advisor, 2 people from your program. So in my case, I was with the Sport Exercise Science, which is now called the Kinesiology, Nutrition and Dietetics, or the KIND program. I had 2 people from there, and then I had an outside person from the educational program. What the idea is that they are going to ask questions based on the classes that you have already taken here at UNC. It's basically, again, a comprehensive understanding of all the content that you have learned up to this point. This committee will stick with you throughout the whole process. I made the mistake of thinking that I had to find a new committee when I got to my orals. That is not true. Again, this is program specific. Talk to your advisor and understand how your program is focused on how they do comps. Every program might do something a little bit different on your comprehensive exams. Again, you're going to have a written side, and this is going to be a little bit more informal, and it kind of might be on just your own schedule and your committee schedule, but the oral comprehensive has to go through the graduate school. I hope this is still the same as it was when I did it, but that's what you have to do. You had to make sure that you registered, because they actually publish when you are presenting this, because this is open to the public. Although you can still do it online, it's also sometimes nice to have everyone in the same room to do something like an oral exam. Some tips for your comps. Understand what definitions of terms are found within your content. For instance, when I say digital media, I have a specific definition of what that means. For example, that does not mean social media. Social media falls under the umbrella of digital media, which is the exchange of information through a digital channel. Me knowing that, it makes sure that I can defend what that word means. It also makes sure that everyone on your committee also understands what digital media means. My example that I've given on this is constructivism. I had to basically defend with one of my committee members what this meant. And I had to use certain references. And I said, I'm using this reference, this article, to determine what constructivism is, versus my professor, who had a different idea because they were using another article. So again, understanding your definition of terms so you can know them and defend them. You also should know what to expect from the committee. Going to your committee members before the exams are an excellent way to know what to expect. It's much better to do that and ask, hey, are there any tips or advice and how I should go about your questions or what you're looking for? Because they're going to want to try to trip you up. They want to see how far you can go until you actually don't know something. And that's kind of a hint. They actually know you don't know everything, and you should know that too. So humble yourself. Also, aim to publish. If you are in a PhD program, that means that you might want to go further into research or academia. Start to think about, what do I need to set everything up in order for me to publish? And again, that's why the idea of that second type of dissertation where it's just ready to publish, maybe that's a better choice for you. And it's okay if you do not pass. For example, I did not pass my written exams. I did not fail the exams, I just did not pass. There is a difference between failing and not passing. The idea is that when you fail, it's basically recorded and it's told to the graduate school, and now you might have like a certain amount of time. I don't know because it didn't happen to me. But when I say that I did not pass, the committee came back and said, hey, you did pretty well, but on this one question, you didn't really answer my questions. So I'm going to give you 2 more weeks so you can answer that question. So they gave me kind of this extra breathing room. But now I really had to crunch, because if I didn't do it good the next time, then I might have failed. Some other tips for this is talk to the library. Yay, you're already here, you're doing this information, but they have plenty of resources. Please go to them and ask questions. It's okay. There are no dumb questions when it comes to these things. They are there for your resources, and you're paying for it. So you might as well use them wisely. You can go to the writing center. It's always nice to have someone with a fresh set of eyes to look at content and on a topic that they might not be familiar with, because you're going to be in such the zone, what might be called tunnel vision, that it might make sense to you, but it might not make sense to someone else. So having a fresh set of eyes is a really good way. For instance, I went to the writing center to make sure my flow from one paragraph to the next was readable and it made sense. Maybe you go there for just grammar purposes. It's okay. Writing is not everyone's strong suit. It wasn't for me. But writing a dissertation, I promise you, will make you a better writer. If you need to go to, there is a statistical research methods lab in McKee. If you are doing anything quantitative, they also help out with qualitative. I believe that is on the top floor, if someone can correct me on that if I am wrong. I went to them in terms of understanding better methodologies, especially when it came to asking quantitative stuff. That was more of my weaker spot. And then schedule things that are within reasonable for not just you, but for the committee. And what I mean by that is the summertime is not always the best. Faculty like to peace out, and they like to not talk to anyone when they are not on contract. So it's not always best to expect everyone to be free during the summer. So make sure that you talk to your committee and know when they are having any, say, vacations or free time. And annoy the grad school. Go to them and ask as many questions as you can, because if you don't know a lot of things, then you don't know it. So you need to figure it out. I went to them a lot, and I would ask plenty of questions, because you don't know what you don't know. Okay. Lastly, what I will share is that on just the standard dissertation, one big thing on this is understanding Microsoft Word. Using Google is nice, like say Google Docs or something, but when you submit this, you are to the graduate school, they are not accepting a Google Doc. They need things in a Word format. In other words, you need to be literate in Microsoft Word, and there is a lot that goes into Microsoft Word. The graduate school has a Canvas shell that's called Formatting Your Thesis and Dissertation Using Microsoft Word. This is an excellent resource to go through the basics of formatting your dissertations. For instance, what is the difference between an orphan or a widow on a page? There are things that the graduate school will be looking for. This ensures that your formatting will be better. So talk to the grad school for this, and I know it's good because I helped create this. So please check it out, because I put a lot of work into it, and so did the other team members. Okay, so that was the comprehensive exams. In my opinion, this was a very, I'm not the best swimmer. That was a lot for me. I felt like once I passed the comps, everything became a lot more clear. And now I'm able to get on my bike and start the next phase, which is the proposal stage. This is the actual beginning of your true dissertation, at least for me. Again, other programs, their comps might be related closer to the proposal. Mine, they had similarities, but there was some differences. In this area, this is where you're writing and defending your proposal, and I'll go over what that is, as well as your IRB, which is the acceptance from the institution that you can conduct research. Let's go back to what a standard dissertation looks like. Okay, so here are our general areas: introduction, literature, review, methods, results, and discussion. The proposal is just the first 3 chapters of that. That's all you're completing in the proposal. Is you're talking about what do you plan to do, what is the literature on that, and how do you plan on conducting this research? In other words, the methods. This is all you're really focused on in your proposal. In this, you're using current tense, meaning that or future tense, you're saying, I will do this, or I plan to do that. It's basically giving the setup and the structure for it. That is what I was never told that's what a proposal was. So I'm trying to make it as clear as possible. One of my best advice on this is find similar dissertations to your own topic. For example, in my case, I found, or this was the title of my dissertation, Implementing Digital Media as a Pedagogical Tool in University Physical Activity Courses. I can break this down. And I did to find different types of dissertations that were relevant to mine. For instance, I found dissertations that were focused on digital media and pedagogy. Pedagogy is the art of teaching. I found dissertations on physical activity courses. I also, because my study was a case study, I found dissertations that did case studies. So I was able to almost imagine like multiple circles and Venn diagrams that are kind of crossing over. You're not going to find the exact best match, but maybe you might be able to find a common theme or thread within other dissertations that you can emulate. So within this proposal, one thing to start off with is just outline. Like, just start off, rather than a blank page, just start listing all of the things that you find important within your topic, and list them out to start thinking about what your proposal is going to be. Regularly meet with your advisor. I've met multiple individuals, PhD students, who rarely meet with their advisor. And when this happens, their anxiety goes through the roof because they don't know what they're doing and they're scared. It's okay to meet with your advisor. They chose to be your advisor for a reason. And therefore, you need to advocate for yourself to meet with them and make sure that you and your advisor are on the same page. A good advice is to write daily. And I don't mean you sit there for an hour a day and you are just trying to write like Stephen King. No, what I mean by this is open up the document and just add a little bit. Maybe add in one reference and into that list that you have already designed out, or maybe you add a new bullet to the list. That is writing, as even that one little piece. By doing that, you're reducing and minimizing the amount of anxiety and overwhelmingness that you have as you continue and as the timeline gets shorter and shorter. It just makes you feel productive, and it makes you familiar when you're sitting back down the next day to be like, where was I? That's what I was doing. Be colorful and think of ways and to help you. For instance, when I was writing mine, I used two colors for two purposes, red and yellow. I used the yellow to say, hey, Dannon, hey, future Dannon, this is incomplete. Go ahead and start working on this. And then every day I would leave one thing that was red. And that one thing, I knew that was the one thing that I wanted to start on the next day. That way, when I close my computer on Tuesday and I open it up Wednesday, I'm overwhelmed by all of the yellow, but I see that one red, I'm going straight there and I'm not thinking about anything else. It's a great way to just have more focus. Again, keep your references organized. I cannot express this enough. You're going to lose track and you're going to, maybe you might delete some from your outline. And then you're going to forget about them. So maybe even have a separate document of all of the resources that you've ever used. That way, in case you accidentally delete, one of my colleagues, she calls it the graveyard, and she keeps everything. She never deletes anything. She always keeps it at the very bottom of the document. So that way she can always reference it at the end. So again, find your way to stay organized, especially with the references. Speaking of references, it's going to get messy. You're going to type in Smith & Jones 2017, but then one time you're going to type in Smith & Jones 2018, and you're going to forget about it. And now you're 193 pages in and you forget about it. There's AI software out there that can actually help you. This is what's called Recite. Back in my day, this was free. Now it's not free anymore. So, but it was offered by the graduate school. There are probably other spots out there. Find something to keep your references organized, but also to make sure that everything is in proper APA format. The sooner you do this, the better, because you're going to have to do this regardless at the very end when you submit your dissertation, unless you're going to hire an editor to do this, and then they're going to charge you up the wazoo. Planning ahead is essential. So thinking through, again, I liked Gantt charts, I like scheduling. The photograph here on the left, the screenshot, is actually from my dissertation, and this showed everything that I was going to do for my study. So I knew that I needed to obtain my IRB approval by May, and then I knew that I was going to conduct a workshop in August, and then I even started when I officially had my data collection, and that was at week 0. And then I even have when I'm collecting journals, and again, I'll talk more about this, but keep everything organized and work backwards. Know when you plan to defend, and work backwards to know how much time do I actually have to do this. Even what I did is I added all of these pieces that is on this into my Outlook calendar, and I gave them different color codes. So by the time that I graduated, my whole calendar looks like a Christmas tree because of all the lights that had happened. Do this to stay organized because, again, staying organized makes you feel less overwhelmed. Within your dissertation, you also might even just have everything prepared. For instance, I created all of my emails that I corresponded with my participants way before I even started the study. This is a way that I know everything, so I just can copy and paste information and send it to my participants, and I'm not trying to create things at the very end. This is, again, just a way to plan ahead and to stay organized. With the proposal, and I do this, I'm guilty, committee members like to poke holes, and they like to see where you lack in certain things. They're going to highlight things that are nice, but they really are going to focus on where are some gaps. So in fact, they might try to trip you up. I've been part of committees where they basically drill the student down until they're like, I don't know, man. And they're like, cool, good job. You finally got there. That is part of it. I call it academic hazing. That's another story. We can talk about it over beers. Expect to get feedback when you are sitting there. You are not going to pass with flying colors and everything is all peachy keen. No, you will have feedback from at least one of those committee members because there's going to be changes that need to be made. And don't forget to breathe. It is a lot of anxiety to have a proposal. In fact, when I had mine, I was fine during it, but mine lasted about 45 minutes more than it should have because of how much discussions and feedback I was given. And I remember the moment I was standing there thinking, what the hell did I do to even get up here? And I did not feel good about it. And then I went home and I cried. I cried a lot. And that's okay because it's just overwhelming because it's the first time that you are truly vulnerable, maybe, and that people are telling you that your work is mediocre, perhaps. And that's okay because they're there to support you. It's not like we're trying to fail you at all. So just know that it's part of the process. When it comes to feedback, you need to be organized. If you have ever written a manuscript and submitted it and they ask for feedback, they usually ask you to, they say, hey, on line 4, you need to change X, Y, and Z. Well, make sure that you send that type of feedback back to your committee. So this is actually a screenshot of some of the pieces of feedback that my committee gave me. They said that I needed to change something. And so I said, hey, okay, on line 4, I addressed the rationale for digital media use with college students. It was something that they mentioned or that they wrote. So then I showed that I fixed that. This is a way to make sure that your communication with your committee member is clear and transparent. You can't just say, I did it and we're good to go. No, they need to know exactly what you did and how you made those changes. When you defend, you will make revisions, and that's okay. Again, that's a normal process. You do have to get a signature. Again, I'm like in that mix of pre and post COVID because I defended in March of 2020, and but it is important and it's nice to get signatures from all the committee members as soon as possible. What I mean by this is that those signatures and that document that has those signatures by your committee saying, hey, Dannon Cox passed, it will be sent to the graduate school. But what can happen is that if you don't get all the signatures and you defended in May and now summertime's happening, that one professor is now out in Belize and they don't have any computer access. And now they're not signing in your documents. And you're like, I need the signature, but they're not communicating. So what's kind of common is that even though you still might need to do revisions or you didn't pass, is that everyone will still sign it, but your advisor can hold it hostage until you make all those revisions, and then now they'll hand you over the signed paper and you're able to send it. Submit it to the grad school as soon as possible, but also make sure on the deadlines that happen. There are certain deadlines where you have to submit at a certain date in order to graduate, in order to make sure that it's before the end of the semester. There's a lot of like deadlines that the grad school has that you need to make sure you are obliging by. Also, do not forget to complete your IRB. I would recommend that you complete your IRB while you're finishing your proposal. Again, you might get feedback on it, but again, doing that as soon as possible is going to save you a lot of time. That is the proposal. That's the second part of it. Once you pass the proposal, you become, to some, a candidate. And this is the final home stretch. This is that last bit where you are running to complete this race. You have been given the okay to start collecting data and start writing your true, like the results and discussion of, really the results of that dissertation. So for this piece, and by the way, I'm more than happy to share this PowerPoint because I know that there's like a lot of information on that Gantt chart. This is the part where you make all the revisions that were found within the proposal of those first 3 chapters, but now the key has been unlocked and you're ready to get going on those next 2 parts. Don't forget to make changes that will have to be made at the end of your dissertation. For instance, remember how I said you'll put things in future tense, like I will do this. Well, now you say I did do this. You need to go back and change every single one of those pieces. So Control F or Command F if you're a Mac user, and looking for future tense ways is something that you will have to do. Again, you're going to make changes and you might make pivots where you remove some references from your main body of content, but you forgot to remove it from your reference list. This change will happen consistently. So being on top of that is a huge time waster. So again, be cautious on that. Make sure that all of your data is backed up somewhere. I have one of the best horror stories when it comes to this. I was in the middle of collecting all of my data and all of a sudden my computer's Wi-Fi just went out. And I was like, well, that's really weird. So I took it to the shop. It was still under warranty. Sure enough, they had to send it in and I had no laptop for about 6 weeks out of my full dissertation. So I had to use multiple computers because of the way my data was set up and the software that was used. So having a backup is incredibly important. Put it on a hard drive, on an external hard drive, or on a cloud, or both. I know one person put everything, like they put it in a Ziploc baggie and they put it in a safe. Like do whatever you need to do to keep to have everything backed up in case something happens. I cannot stress enough how much it is important to stay organized, whether it is analog, whether you have printed versions, or whether it is digital copies of something. Just keeping things organized, especially when it comes to revisions, because you're going to date things, you're going to say version 1, version 2, whatever way works for you. That rhymed. That was cool. Okay, so for an example on my dissertation, I was qualitative. So I had a lot of different components of data collection. I did interviews, and so I had transcriptions. I used Temi, which was a transcription service, but honestly, this was like pre-ChatGPT and all of this AI. Now all of this is pretty common now of standardized ways. The accuracy is still not always the best, and you still need to double check everything. I also had observations, I had document collections, I had participant journals, and I had reflections. So I had a lot of data in a lot of different areas, again, which is just, again, part of my organization stress. Again, write daily, or at least almost daily. Give yourself some time. And for some reason, it went all the way back. Excuse me, while I don't know why I did that. Talks amongst yourselves. The topic is caramel. How is it pronounced? Give me 1 second. I'm going to get to it. There we go. Okay. Okay. Sorry about that. It's okay to bring some of your work, like while you're working on your dissertation, to maybe some of your other PhD students, to ask like, hey, is this making sense? It's not always best to annoy your committee members with this consistently, but if you're at a crossroads, you're like, I don't know if I need to go left or right on this situation. It's okay to ask, because again, they're here to support you. They're not trying to just say, to feed you to the wolves, so to speak. I always had daily or weekly checkpoints. So when I was transcribing information or I was analyzing results, I would say, okay, by the end of the week, I would like to finish 4 of my 8 participant transcriptions. Just again, work backwards and give yourself some goals. So you know what, this Wednesday night, I'm not going out tonight. I am staying in and transcribing. That is what I got to do, because I need to make my goals. Whatever it is for you, just make sure it's also reasonable. When you have revisions, especially between you and your advisor, make sure that you have some sort of track changes, or maybe have it in a separate document. Again, I once heard a kind of like a horror story where there were all these revisions, and this doc student went ahead and made all these changes to this 150-page document and just gave it to their advisor, like, here, I made the change. The advisor is not going to reread 150 pages. Letting them know exactly where they need to look at via the comments, or if it's highlighted, is going to be a lot easier and quicker between you and the advisor in terms of getting things pushed out. Again, line numbers or page numbers, keeping that as part of your communication channel is very important, because your document will change. And whereas it was once at page 42, now it's on page 44. Don't forget to put on your manuscript hat. If you are thinking about publishing, even right now is a good time to start thinking, what manuscript, or excuse me, what journal do I want to submit this to? What are the requirements? What is the word limit? What is the page limit? All these things. Start thinking about it, because I promise you, once you defend, you're going to be so exhausted that you're going to be like, screw this, I never want to look at this again. But you really do want to look at it again, because you want to publish that as soon as possible, because the adrenaline is fresh. And the information is fresh in your mind. Okay, now for the defense itself. You're standing in front of your advisor, your committee members, and perhaps your mom and maybe dog. Make sure that you are receiving approval for any changes that you have made with your advisor. Again, your advisor is there to support and also sometimes defend you. And in other words, you might have made an audible that the other committee members didn't know about, but your advisor did. So as long as the advisor knows, they can back you up and be like, no, we talked about this, and here's the reason why. That's a pretty common thing that I've seen being on dissertation committees. You're going to be so overwhelmed that do not bother about like taking notes about what they're saying. Ask like either your advisor should be the one taking the notes, because their clout is on the line based on your performance. And so when you look bad, they look bad. And so there is this kind of mutual respect and understanding. So have someone, mainly your advisor, to take notes. I actually had a friend, she just did it out of the blue. She actually went to my proposal and took extra notes, and she gave it to me at the very end. And it was super helpful, because she caught things that my advisor didn't catch. And so it was a great way. So even if you have another doc student that you're friends with, y'all should do that for each other. It's a great exchange, and also a way to know how committee members and how the process works overall. If you need to, maybe you have some note cards for your slides. I know that I practiced a lot, and there were certain slides where I really struggled on making it timely, and I would jumble over my words. So I actually would script out certain slides, and I would read those literally verbatim. But I didn't do that for the whole thing. That would be ridiculous. It was just for these like few pieces where I just would kind of mix my words up. Practice, 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 practice. Time yourself. It becomes less and less scary if you hit record and you sit there and you start going over the processes or the actual presentation. And also note the slides where you're really struggling, so you can practice those a little bit more. And again, maybe that's where you find those note cards or that script handy. Within your presentation and your dissertation defense, I'm gonna stress this too, because I've seen this way too many times, and I still see it with when I'm on a committee. By the time you are on your dissertation, your committee member already knows about the literature review. They do not care about that. They already know about the methods. there might be some minor changes. What they are really interested in looking at is your results and discussion. I have seen plenty of people spend more than 25 minutes just discussing the literature review at their dissertation. And I'm like, dude, we already know this. We went through this a few months ago. So get to the results. Again, it's just the idea of being punctual on the content and why you're actually here. Because again, you already passed your proposal. They know about the literature review. Within your presentations, as you've seen, kind of my theme and my style of my presentation so far is keep things simple. I've kept things, and I have my own route and the way I do things. Again, I come from a digital media background, so this is like my jam. But try to keep things, I know it's academic, but try to keep things simple in terms of your presentation. Do not put 3 paragraphs on a PowerPoint and expect people to read it. No, you should be able to articulate it and use the slides as a reference point for whatever you need to talk about. A good rule of thumb is to have no more than 24 words on a slide, if possible. Again, it's not always ideal, and I'll show you an example here how I even didn't do that. I prefer bullet points and summaries, not long, drawn-out statements. Again, the slides, your PowerPoint or your slide deck slides should be references and not things that you're reading verbatim. Because congratulations, you can read that, but so can your committee member. So just keep it simple to the point, and they're listening to you. They're not necessarily listening to the slides. I like to have visual themes. I'm a visual person. So if you've noticed, I've kind of put things in analogies like the triathlon. When I've talked about tips, I use an icon like this. If that's not your jam, that's totally fine. It's just a way that I prefer because it helps me personally, because when I'm scared and I'm nervous, I can look up at the slides and say, oh yeah, this is a tip slide. So now I know what I'm looking at. So now I'm going to briefly show a quick example of my dissertation based on 4 slides that I used, and it's on the results and discussion pages of this. It's going to feel overwhelming at first, but I'm going to just kind of dissect it and just show you some quick examples and tips for the larger piece of the rationale to things. So this was while I was explaining my results. Again, this was qualitative, so I had multiple themes going, and I was going through all of those themes. Notice that I had I had like one theme up here of common experiences, and I kept things very to the point, and I left the text open and bold and large. And I was able to talk about each of these specifically. I also had just quotes, and I kept it separately. And then I had these bullet points were reminding me that as I was reading this quote out loud, that I would talk about the experience with online physical activity courses and how it was autonomy focused. Again, I'm using these as cue cards and not as something that I'm reading verbatim. This is where the practice comes in handy. So, and the other piece on this, so then I would transfer into the discussion. And in these discussions, I used familiar themes. And I know that this looks like a circus clown threw up, but there were relevant pieces to this that were part of the earlier part of the presentation. So I was basically almost telling a story within my PowerPoint presentation. So each of these themes, these symbols, had meaning to it. It's not like I needed the committee to remember that. It was actually for me to remember these pieces. Other pieces were, I had all my slide numbers in case the committee members were like, hey, can you go back to that slide 42 and can we discuss that? Because I had a lot of slides on this. I also had almost like a what we're focused on here and what we will be focusing on in future slides. So that way it kind of gave a times table. Whenever I would cite, I would keep the citations very small, and I'll keep them smaller than the regular text because it can get overwhelming if I was trying to add in all of these references that are found here under promoting digital literacy. And again, something like the discussion is where your results relate to relevant literature that has already done some similar studies. So again, kind of keeping the idea of what is important, what really needs to be highlighted versus what are the things that are more for reference for me versus what is something that doesn't need to be in this at all. So again, this is just showing you how I was going from one slide to the next. I like to use PowerPoint. I'm biased because I like PowerPoint. They have a morph feature, which kind of makes transitions easy. Okay, so you do your presentation, you're almost done. there's a few more things that must be done. You must do all formatting and make things properly for Carol Stewart here at the UNC Graduate School. You might hire an editor to do this. That's okay. You're going to be so exhausted from looking at your content that you're like, you know what, just I will pay the $750. Yes, that is not an exaggeration. It can actually go higher than that. For someone to look over your content, depending on the quality of the editor. The UNC Graduate School also has a list of editors that they support. It's usually people who used to work here at UNC. And then also, it's no longer required, but you used to have to print your dissertation, which you would actually have to go down to somewhere in Denver and pick it up, which is, I don't know, personally for me, I think it's cool to have that and also give one to your advisor. It's worth the extra money because it's kind of like, hey, you published this book. So in conclusion, the dissertation comes in multiple steps, comes in a lot of steps actually. But if you break it down, it does come down to, what do your comps look like? What does your proposal look like? And how does that proposal set you up for the actual full part of your dissertation? Because your proposal and dissertation are the same thing. The proposal is just that key to unlock you to actually being able to conduct this research study. Thank you. And now we're at questions. Choosing your faculty rep. So for everyone else, a faculty rep is that outside committee member from your group. So for instance, I gave the example that I had people from the kind department, and then my outside person was from the education department. And I went, I really had to think about who would I do, who would know this topic and this content, at least from one level or another. And I ended up choosing a professor from one of my electives that I took in education technology. So again, because I have a digital media background, I figured having someone in technology and education would be helpful. And so what was nice about having someone that I had already had a professor is they know who you are, hopefully, and they're familiar with your type of work, and they're able to just have more familiarity and that relationship between you. You might find someone that's outside of that, and that's okay too. Maybe you've never taken a class with this person, but their research is similar to that. So as long as there's, again, this level of Venn diagram of this crossover, that's the important piece of the rep. What they're there to do is to almost count as a almost as a safeguard of the rest of the committee. What I mean by that is your committee members might all be like basically homogenous. They might all like think the same, talk the same, and so everything makes the same sense to them. But that faculty rep can come in and be like, hold on, what are y'all talking about? What is this? And so it actually offers a level of making sure that the other committee members aren't being too biased, or they're doing something, say, like, I guess, a little bit different than other groups. So it's almost like a counterbalance. So finding someone that can almost be not just a counterbalance to your committee, but also finding someone that has that similar topic or research interest to you. It's a very vulnerable space. And sorry, I had someone knock, so it kind of threw me off on the question, Nancy. But it's it's such a vulnerable space because you've been working so much by yourself on this document, and you almost, as my advisor said, you're married to this dissertation. You are so committed to it, and that you end up like loving it and hating it, arguing with it, and you have all of these feelings, these true emotions with this single document, that it's the first time that you are giving it to people who you really don't know and who also have power and authority over you to determine whether it is even worthwhile. And knowing that feeling is very, very, again, I think the best word is vulnerable. You feel so raw to actually sharing this with someone else that it kind of impacted me in such a way that people read it, and all you wanted was validation. And that's what we are constantly wanting within PhD is, am I doing this right? Will you love me? And that's what this dissertation kind of process has made me do, because I didn't know if I was doing good enough. We're at this level where we are at a terminal degree. We're at the highest of what we can within our topic, and yet we obviously are go-getters, but now we're a go-getter who might fail. And so it's almost this feeling of this dip, of this pit that you fell in while you were climbing. And did I skip anything on that, Nancy, on kind of hitting things?
No, I think that's helpful. And someone put in the chat that they literally put in their takeaway notes. You will cry. It says so relatable. Thank you.
Yes, Crystal, it's true. And it's okay. Like I think it's part of just this overwhelming thing. Like, I think this is also a good actually piece of advice is don't forget to celebrate the small steps. In that you might be such like this perfectionist that you never feel like, no, I shouldn't celebrate. Like, even I showed you 3 big accomplishments that you went through, but there's small things that you should go out and celebrate with your peers. For instance, like the moment that you stop collecting data and all you're doing is analyzing data, that is a huge moment of celebration, because you're like, I am done collecting this data. This has been a lot. Celebrate on those pieces. Don't forget those little kind of moments, because it's really easy to just move on and just keep your head down and kind of ignore everyone else's or ignore your own accomplishments throughout this process and journey. Yeah, what's nice is that if you pass your dissertation, that is technically a publication. It is out in the world, and if you type in your name in Google Scholar, it will show up. The difference is what do you want to do with your career and why you chose a PhD? Many of us might want to continue in academia, and having a publication in your name, it just adds to your CV. So, therefore, the idea in that you might take a professor role, then you can already say you get that job right after you graduate, then you get that paper published while you're a professor. Well, now you already have a publication and you're able to just continue on with your work. And if this is a topic that you are really passionate about, this is basically stage 1 of you doing similar work as a snowball to your dissertation and your journal. I think the other piece on that is knowing what it's like to publish in an actual academic journal. All journals are different. Their impact factor is different. Their requirements are different. So it's you actually understanding the world of academia and research just that much better by actually publishing. I would, yes. And the only reason why I say that is that if you need to make changes, if a good example is, okay, the widow and orphan, which is like when you have like a title or the end of a paragraph and it's at the very end or it's at the very beginning of a page. The dissertation, the UNC Graduate School will not allow certain orphans and widows. They need to find a better term for that. That's a little antiquated. But knowing that if you made changes after you defend, like I had to do, like I got feedback, so I had to make those changes. Well, then all of those things might be different. Now, maybe I took away one paragraph, and taking away that one paragraph, now my entire table of contents, all of those pages are way different. Now my literature review starts at page 20, and before it was on page 24 because of all the shifts that have happened. So that's my recommendation, to do an edit, to hire an editor right before you submit it to the graduate school. That's a great question. My first thought is within this program, you know that it's going to end and that you are here for the sole purpose of completing a dissertation. And having that as a goal, in my opinion, motivated me that I need to hurry up and graduate and know that I have a timeline. The other piece on that comes to mind is it's why it's important to have a topic that you love. when you're passionate about it, you're naturally going to be intrinsically motivated. I love digital media and I love movement. And so me doing research on those two things, I was consistently curious. I like it, and so it wasn't an outside force telling me to be motivated. It was me like, no, I want to know this. I want to know how this works. So having a topic that you truly, again, are married to, and not just something that you're just like, yeah, okay, whatever. Let me just get this done. I've seen people just kind of do the I'll just find something and get it done. And their dissertation usually takes a lot longer because they're not motivated to do it. Again, I think setting those short-term goals, whether it be by the week, is important. I also think using your time wisely. In other words, I was very strict with my regimens throughout the day. I knew when I was going to work out. I knew when I was going to run. I knew when I was going to eat. And having certain pieces to know that I'm carving out this time to just write is going to be motivating because I am designating it to this. One piece of advice that I heard from someone when I was in my PhD was you can be a good student, you can be a good family member, and you can be a good friend, but you cannot be all three. And so some sort of sacrifice might have to happen. During your few years getting your PhD, you hopefully can be the best student you can because that's the purpose of you being here. I was not always the best friend. I was not always the best family member at times. And that's okay. And that was also me telling people, hey, please love me still. I just will be in my office or in my room for a long time. So send me some love. So finding those little bits of pieces to motivate you, such as support from others, is also a great way to know that you are doing the right thing here.
Thank you. It also strikes me that something you said earlier, which is celebrating the steps along the way and finishing those, could be motivating too.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's not as if there's only one celebration at the very end of a years long process. There are actually big milestones that go through it. That seems to link with that question.
The best analogy that comes to mind thinking about that is that I had imagine like, okay, you're practicing pottery and the end goal is to have like a certain type of pot. The classes at the beginning of your PhD journey, it was more or less playing with what does my bowl want to look like, and a lot of that actually did transfer, but it was almost like slightly off. Like it was really the references that really transferred from one piece to the next. It wasn't my work. In fact, by the time that you're in your proposal, you're going to look at your old assignments and be like, ooh, that's how I wrote. And so you're absolutely going to rip that apart. But the references are the bigger pieces of what was actually shown from the classes into the dissertation itself.
With that, we'll go ahead and close out. And many thanks to Dannon for presenting and all of our participants. We had an excellent number of registrations, so there's clearly a lot of interest in this. So I'm very glad you were willing to take part in this. And there will be another Bear Grads presentation coming up a little bit later in October. So please do be on the lookout for publicity related to that.